In Project, a work resource is one you assign based on time, like a person who works full-time or half-time, or a moving truck that you rent for 5 days. When you create work resources, you provide basic information, name, initials, work group, and so on. You also specify how much resources are available and when, so Project can calculate the schedule. If you set up the resources cost fields, the program can also calculate your costs. Well, to look at work resources, go to the Resource Sheet. On the View tab, click Resource Sheet. And here we have several work resources. Your first choice is whether you want to create generic resources or resources for specific people. So for example, you can create generic resources like the ones here with the job skill, the relocation project manager, office manager, telecom admin. So let's say we're going to create a new resource for a network admin. So you type the job skill in the resource name field and press enter, and you can see Project creates a work resource. Well, these generic resources are really good early on when you're staffing up the project. You can put in the skill that you need, you assign the project so you see how many of those resources you need. And then when you get the real people and you have actual names, you can replace the generic resources with the people assigned to your project. If you create resources for actual people, then you put their names in. Usually you want to do last name, first name, so it's easier to find them, unless the team is really small. Press enter, and I've got another work resource. Well, the next field is initials, and you can see that Project takes the first letter of the resource name and puts it in the initials field. Well, that's not very useful because it doesn't tell you very much, and it's also going to lead to a lot of duplication. So typically you'll want to put in a few more initials. For a generic resource, you can just abbreviate the name, so maybe NET for the network admin. And for the person, John Doe, we'll put in JPD for John Patrick Doe. The initials are really helpful if you want to have resources show in your Gantt chart timescale. You can assign initials instead of the resource name so that the names don't take up as much space, but you can still see who's assigned. Another thing to keep in mind is that you can't have commas and brackets in resource names. So if you're going to do last name, first name, just leave the comma out. The next field is the group field, and that's good for categorizing your resources. So you can see that some of the resources already have a group, like the IT group, and then the vendors assigned to the project. You can use the group field to put all your resources together so that you can see everything that the IT group is doing, or you could even group by the vendors to see how much you're spending on outside vendors. So for example, the network admin is in the IT group, whereas John Doe is actually a contractor, so maybe we'll set up a new group called contractor. Now, the next field that you come to is maximum units, and you can see it says max, but it actually means maximum units. And this is part of a work resources availability. The other part is over here in the base column, which actually stands for base calendar. So these two fields will tell the project how much a work resource is available. Well, the first one, the max units, Project fills in 100%, and that means that the resource is dedicated, or 100% of their available time is dedicated to this project. Most of the time, that's what you want. If you think about it, when somebody attends a meeting, they don't attend a meeting half-time. They're either there or they're not. So 100% is a good value. The one time where you might increase the value is if you have a team of people with interchangeable skills. So, for example, the movers. Let's say you have a team of 5 movers, and you really don't care which of the 5 you get, but you have 5 of them. So you can change the maximum units to 500% to indicate that you have 5 full-time workers. The base calendar, on the other hand, defines the working schedule for a work resource. So, for example, let's say that John Doe, the contractor, works part-time. So we assign the Office Relo part-time calendar to this resource. Well, let's see how the maximum units and the calendar work together. So I double-click the resource row for John Doe, and the resource information dialog box comes up. I'm going to go to the General tab and click Change Working Time. Now you can see here that it says 8 to 10 a.m. If I go look at the Work Weeks tab, got the default work week for this part-time calendar and click Details. And then I select Monday through Friday. And you can see very lightly that the part-time schedule is 8 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. Well, John Doe is assigned 100% to the project, so that's 100% of his available time. Well, that's based on the calendar, and in this calendar, the work week is 10 hours, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. So he's available to this project 10 hours a week. So I'll cancel out of there. The other thing that you can do is you can actually change a resources calendar, for example, to show when they take vacation, that sort of thing. So to do that, I'll click Cancel, get out of these dialog boxes. In this case, I'm going to go to the Project tab and click Change Working Time here. Well, now you can see I've got the John Doe resource calendar is open. And you can see that it's based on the part-time calendar, so that's still in place. But now we're actually going to put things that are specific to John Doe. And in this case, we're going to add his vacation. And that starts on August 5th, 2014, and it finishes on August 9th. And now you can see that those days are set up as non-working days. Click OK to close this dialog box. You'll see how to use the cost fields when we talk about setting up resource costs. Now I'm going to open up the information dialog box for the project manager. So double-click, and the resource information dialog box opens. And you can see that there's actually quite a few fields that you can fill in for a resource. One of them is the generic checkbox. So since this is a job skill name, turn on that checkbox. And that way, you can check your project and look for the generic resources that are assigned, and then you'll know who you still have to replace before the work actually gets underway. You can also do things like change resource availability during different date ranges. And on the Cost tab, you can set up different cost tables. For example, if you have a contractor who charges different amounts depending on the work they do, you can actually set up these different cost tables to reflect those different rates. Now, one thing that Project does when you assign resources, if you type in a resource name that doesn't exist in your project file, Project will automatically create a new resource for you. Well, the problem with that is if you introduce a typo into the resource name, you'll end up with a duplicate resource, and that causes all sorts of problems. So you can tell Project not to create those new resources for you automatically. To do that, go to the File tab, choose Options, and then go to the Advanced category. You can see down in the General Options for this project section, the Automatically Add New Resources and Tasks, and the checkbox is turned on. Well, if you don't want Project to automatically add new resources, turn the checkbox off. That way, if you type a name that doesn't exist in the project file, Project will ask you if you want to add the resource. If it is a new valid resource, click Yes to add it. And if it's a typo, you can click No and then choose the resource that you want. After you create work resources, you're ready to assign them to tasks. Once you do that, Project uses the values from resource fields to calculate the schedule and cost.